When millions of fans converge for the FIFA World Cup, the energy reaches a fever pitch. It is a month-long broadcast to billions, showcasing the highest level of human athletic achievement. The 2022 tournament centered on that high-stakes on-pitch drama. During the quarterfinal between Argentina and the Netherlands, tensions erupted into the Battle of Lusail, producing a record-breaking 19 yellow cards in a single match. But the spectacle required a massive industrial effort. To stage these matches, Qatar spent an estimated $220 billion on infrastructure, built through a system of severe human exploitation. This intersection of massive capital and documented labor abuses points to a strategy known as sports washing. It occurs when a state uses international sports to distract global audiences from its domestic record, attempting to clean its public image through the lens of a beloved game. The result was a deliberate paradox. A tiny desert nation with zero football history and 40-degree summer heat used the world's most watched event to position itself at the center of global culture. The operation started in December 2010. A shocked international audience watched as Qatar edged out established footballing nations like the United States and Japan to secure the hosting rights for 2022. This wide shot shows the insular FIFA Executive Committee meeting where those decisions were made. The Michael Garcia report later detailed how the bidding process was undermined by a culture of entitlement among the members who eventually awarded the hosting rights. Securing the World Cup was only one piece of a broader acquisition strategy. Qatar's sovereign wealth funds rapidly began buying up assets across 6 continents, sponsoring SC Barcelona's kits, purchasing Paris Saint-Germain, and securing massive European broadcasting rights. By owning the clubs, the broadcasting rights, and the tournament itself, the state embedded its brand into the daily habits of the global football market. Actually hosting the World Cup presented an entirely different logistical problem. The country had to construct 7 state-of-the-art stadiums, new rapid transit systems, and an entirely new city from the desert sand up. To solve their massive labor shortage, the state relied on the kafala system. This legal sponsorship framework bound hundreds of thousands of migrant workers from South Asia to their specific Qatari employers, stripping them of their right to change jobs or leave the country without permission. This chart shows the scale of the human toll behind that construction. Data from government sources shows that over 6,500 migrant workers from South Asia died in Qatar in the decade following its successful World Cup bid. Qatari authorities largely obscured these fatalities by categorizing them without medical autopsies. For Indian workers, 80% of these deaths were officially recorded under the classification of natural causes, often attributed to unexplained heart or respiratory failure. The conditions on the ground were often lethal. Workers like Mohammed Shahid Mia from Bangladesh arrived burdened by recruitment debt, only to be electrocuted when heavy rains flooded his unsafe living quarters and exposed his room to live wires. The arenas and infrastructure broadcast to billions were effectively built through an unaccountable system of modern indentured servitude. As reports on these labor conditions gained traction, the state deployed massive resources to control the narrative and counter the negative press. They utilized highly paid celebrity ambassadors. Figures like David Beckham were recruited to tour the facilities, providing glowing character references to global audiences regarding the safety and quality of the country's infrastructure. Simultaneous to the PR push, authorities tightened control. They barred international film crews from recording at labor camps and threatened national teams with immediate sporting sanctions if their players wore armbands promoting LGBTQ+ rights. The strategy relies on maintaining complete atmospheric control, ensuring the global audience is so immersed in the spectacle of the matches that the suffering just outside the stadium remains invisible. Political scientists refer to this dynamic as the Olympic catch-22. States host mega events to clean their image, but the intense global spotlight inevitably exposes their internal practices to the world. Scrutiny forced Qatar to implement some late-stage labor reforms, including the introduction of a minimum wage. However, human rights groups note that the enforcement of these laws remains deeply flawed. Despite the backstory of its construction, the football itself delivered legendary moments, capped off by Lionel Messi finally lifting the trophy. The 2022 World Cup demonstrated that high-level sports do not exist in a vacuum. It showed that the game is now a sophisticated tool of geopolitics, leaving fans to weigh the thrill of the match against the human and ethical cost of its production. The 2002 FIFA World Cup broke the mold before a single ball was kicked. Held jointly by South Korea and Japan, it was the first time the tournament landed in Asia. Almost immediately, the old football hierarchy collapsed. Defending champions France crashed out in the group stage, quickly followed by title favorites Argentina. In the massive vacuum left behind, a new contender emerged. South Korea, a team that had never previously won a World Cup match, charged all the way to the semifinals, achieving a historic first for any Asian nation. They were lifted by an overwhelming wave of local passion. Millions of citizens flooded the streets and stadiums, creating an intimidating, coordinated sea of red that gave the home team an undeniable psychological edge. Decades later, this specific run remains a focal point for debate, as the achievement is inseparable from the officiating that accompanied it. It remains arguably the most discussed string of matches in football history. To understand why a single tournament fractured the sports world so deeply, we have to look at the exact same sequence of events through two completely conflicting realities. Reality 1 focuses strictly on the pitch. Under the direction of Dutch manager Guus Hiddink, South Korea played with exceptional structure and tactical discipline. They actively out-organized their opponents. Hiddink drilled his players to a level of physical conditioning that allowed them to press relentlessly for 90 minutes. This energy translated into results, such as their group stage victory over a talented Portuguese squad. Neutral observers and football historians watched this play out and saw a team maximizing its potential. South Korea proved they could go toe-to-toe with traditional European elites on pure merit. From this purely analytical perspective, the host nation earned their deep tournament run through measurable, modern football metrics and an unyielding work ethic. Reality 2 starts in the round of 16. The underdog narrative collided directly with Italy, a heavily favored, highly experienced squad packed with world-class stars. The match was instantly physical, but a pattern quickly emerged that infuriated the Italian side. South Korean players committed repeated, intense tactical fouls that continually went unpunished by the referee. The boiling point arrived deep into the match. Italian star forward Francesco Totti went down inside the penalty area. Instead of awarding a penalty, he judged Totti faked the fall, giving a disputed second yellow card and sending him off the pitch. Forced to play with 10 men, Italy eventually conceded a golden goal and were sent packing. Within hours, international media and Italian officials launched explosive accusations that the refereeing had been heavily skewed to guarantee a home team victory. This single result took scattered complaints about crowd pressure and molded them into a coordinated, global theory of systemic referee bias. The quarterfinal against Spain shifted the conversation from localized suspicion to international protest. The Spanish national team stepped onto the pitch, and the events that followed deepened the controversy. This diagram illustrates exactly what went wrong. Spain successfully headed the ball into the net, but officials disallowed the goal, incorrectly judging that the ball's curve had taken it completely over the out-of-bounds line before the cross was delivered. Shortly after, a second Spanish goal was wiped out. This time, the referee called an incredibly confusing infringement in the box, leaving the Spanish players visibly furious and commentators totally baffled. South Korea ultimately won the match in a penalty shootout, and the backlash was immense. Serious conspiracy theories spread rapidly, claiming FIFA was intentionally protecting the host nation to keep local TV ratings and stadium revenues high. While no evidence of match fixing emerged, the concentration of officiating errors in a single knockout match left the tournament's integrity open to persistent questioning. If we look past the conspiracy theories, we are left with a stark, technological reality. In 2002, the matches were controlled entirely by solitary humans operating completely on perception. Referees had only a fraction of a second to make incredibly complex judgments at full athletic speed, without any safety net or access to multiple replay angles. Journalists and historians spent years revisiting every questionable decision frame by frame. What this intense post-tournament scrutiny ultimately proved was that the speed and athleticism of modern football had finally outpaced the biological capacity of the human eye. The resulting outrage acted as a primary catalyst for systemic reform. It directly forced the sport to eventually adopt crucial innovations like goal line technology and the video assistant referee system. The 2002 World Cup stands as a historical paradox. It paired a historical display of underdog discipline with the undeniable limitations of officiating in the pre-digital era. 72,000 fans packed into Estadio Monumental for the 1978 World Cup final, creating a roar of national pride that filled the streets of Buenos Aires. Yet less than a mile away from those cheers, political prisoners were being tortured inside a clandestine detention center known as the Navy Petty School of Mechanics. The horrors were close enough that stadium ground staff staged a silent act of protest, painting black armbands on the base of the goalposts to mourn the citizens who had recently vanished. 2 years earlier, a military junta led by General Jorge Rafael Videla seized power. They immediately initiated the Dirty War, a systematic purge of students, journalists, and dissidents. For the junta, the tournament was an opportunity to project an image of peace and stability to the globe. For the families of the victims, the arrival of thousands of international journalists offered a rare moment of global attention. While the teams fought for the trophy, the regime and the citizens were engaged in a conflict over who would define Argentina to the outside world. General Videla recognized the power of a global broadcast. He ordered a top-down strategy to use the stadiums, the crowds, and the matches to rewrite the regime's reputation on live television. The junta even secured diplomatic cover. The classified documents reveal that U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger privately signaled support for the military's activities, while publicly promising to attend the World Cup to validate the hosts. To advance, Argentina needed to beat Peru by at least 4 goals. They won 6-0. Later, a Peruvian senator testified that under Operation Condor, Argentina took in 13 kidnapped dissidents in exchange for Peru throwing the game. The atmosphere was so intense that Dutch superstar Johan Cruyff refused to attend the tournament entirely, citing the severe mental toll of the 1978 event. Through diplomatic alliances and alleged match-fixing, the regime secured its spot in the final, creating what looked like the perfect cover for its domestic actions. Media analysis shows a divide in how journalists handled the event based on their home country. U.S. publications like the New York Times focused almost exclusively on the games, prioritizing the sport and reinforcing the regime's narrative of stability. But in the center of the capital, at the Plaza de Mayo, a group of housewives and mothers was gathering to search for the children the government claimed did not exist. These mothers realized that the sudden influx of foreign sports reporters provided a way to bypass local censorship and reach an international audience. They made themselves impossible to ignore. They wore white headscarves, carried photos of their children, and marched directly where the foreign television cameras were pointed. The tactic worked with outlets less aligned with the regime's allies. Journalists from France's Le Monde followed the story, shifting their coverage away from the stadiums and toward the human rights abuses. By providing an undeniable visual of resistance, the mothers broke the illusion of a unified, peaceful nation that the junta had spent millions to maintain. Argentina ultimately won the World Cup on the pitch, but the junta was beginning to lose the argument on the global stage. The scrutiny brought by the mothers turned international attention toward the regime's detention centers. By the end of the tournament, the government's attempts to portray Argentina as a peaceful nation were being challenged in newsrooms across Europe. The military junta eventually fell in 1983. The mothers of the Plaza de Mayo continued their march every Thursday, eventually securing the prosecution of over 1,000 war criminals and the imprisonment of Videla himself. The 1978 tournament remains a primary example of how authoritarian regimes use global mega-events to distract from domestic reality. It serves as a reminder that a regime can fix a match or intimidate the local press, but they cannot fully control where the cameras point or who chooses to stand in front of them.